With just 3 games in the books in the 2025-26 season, Lane Hutson has signed a big-time extension for 8 years, averaging $8.85 million every single season. And on today's show, we'll be breaking down just how good value this is for the Montreal Canadiens.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this show, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I'm your host, Sebastian High, the USHL and NCAA scout over at Elite Prospects. And on today's episode, we are going to be talking about Lane Hutson and the Montreal Canadiens, as he has just signed his extension at 8 years at $8.5 million. And we'll be breaking down today just how good value this is, why he signed at this type of deal, and we'll be comparing his salary to other defensemen around the NHL to look at some comparables in terms of the value of this contract. But I think more than anything, we'll be looking at how this fits into the overall project that the Habs are building, because I think that this number is more reflective in many ways of the Habs organization, the direction they're taking in, and the management that they're under, than it is of Lane Hutson's pure abilities. He could have gotten more money than this if he'd signed elsewhere. He could have also gotten less money if it had been in a team in a no-tax state, for instance. But in all likelihood, this is on the lower end that he would have signed with any NHL team, no matter where he had been drafted. But before we dive into the show here today, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app right now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So let's talk about Lane. He's a player that has been divisive for a decent amount of the time since being drafted, but at least in the last 8 or 9 months or so, at the tail end of last season, going a point a game in the playoffs, leading the Habs in playoff scorings in those 5 games, and a 66-point rookie campaign, good enough to earn him the Calder Trophy over a fantastic candidate in Macklin Celebrini. Those doubters seem to have petered away in many cases. There definitely are still some out there in terms of especially his defensive impact and still being too small, and he's going to just stagnate. But this is a special talent. With a puck on his stick, there aren't many players in the league, whether it be defensemen or forwards, that can match what he's able to do. He's incredibly creative, the skillful, the intelligence, the pace of thinking and of overall executing plays is already at an elite level in this league. So I definitely don't think that it's too early for the Habs to kind of bite the bullet and give the big dollars after just like 87 NHL games played, if you don't count the playoffs that he played in. Like, this guy does not have the most NHL experience, quite clearly, and even this season has kind of seen a slightly decreased role in the small sample size that we have so far, because Noah Dobson and Mike Matheson have been a tremendous pairing together so far. But Lane Hutson is at the core of what this team is building. He is a dynamic player from the blue line, of which there are very few of this caliber throughout the National Hockey League today. We're talking about the Quinn Hutson. His brother's also named Quinn Hutson. I was thinking Quinn Hughes, rather. Cale Makar, Adam Fox, even. You have these caliber of offensive creators from the blue line. And Lane Hutson, as a rookie, in terms of expected assists, in terms of what he was generating, the shot quality, the chance quality that he was creating single-handedly through his activations, through his slot passing, already just at the elite caliber. And to do so for an entire 82-game season as a very undersized defenseman. I mean, he's still only listed at 5'10", 165, and that 5'10" might be rounding up a little bit. He might be closer to 5'9.5". That is beyond impressive, in my opinion. And for anybody that's been following the podcast or my work in general for a little while now, you know that I'm a pretty big Lane Hutson fan. I've been really lauding his merits going back to his draft year campaign. So seeing him earn this big contract after having him ranked 11th overall in 2022 in that draft, that means I had him ranked higher than players like Joakim Kamel, Danila Yurov, Cutter Gauthier, Jonathan Lekaramaki, Kevin Korchinski, a lot of players that were drafted above him. I mean, he went 62nd overall. A lot of players got drafted above him. I never quite saw in terms of quite equaling his dynamic skill. He's always been a really special player in my eyes, and quite clearly was the third or fourth top defenseman in that draft class at the time, in my view. With hindsight, I would definitely put him at number one. But look, nobody predicted just how dominant he would be this early. But look, the Habs are reaping the benefits of that swing they took at 62nd overall just 3 and a bit years ago. And to sign him to this big of an extension, I think is also a real reflection of Lane Hutson's ability to break down barriers and defy expectations. He's always been an undersized, shifty offensive defenseman that can create something out of nothing, but the expectation was always that he would hit a wall at the next level, and then the level after that, once he proved those people wrong. We saw that in terms of his progression to college hockey when he went to Boston University. We saw a lot of people saying, oh, he could do it against junior comp, but he's just not going to be able to do so against the bigger, pacier, more physical college opponents. And he had no issue doing so. I mean, just to recap a little bit here, in Lane Hutson's draft year, he had a tremendous production from the blue line with the NTDP, with that really strong lineup that season especially. He had 10 goals and 63 points in 60 games from the blue line that season. That was good for top among defensive scorers. He almost doubled the next top scoring defenseman, which was another gem of a selection by the New Jersey Devils this time, Seamus Casey. But he was tied with Jimmy Snuggerud. He was 2 points behind Cutter Gauthier, just a couple more points behind guys like Rutger McGroarty and Frank Nazar, and not even all that far behind Logan Cooley in terms of draft year production. And then he moved on to the BU Terriers, and from the get-go was just blowing records out of the water. Freshman campaign, 39 games played, 15 goals, 48 points. Fantastic numbers right there. And he followed it up, winning the Hobey Baker as well. With actually, did he? I actually don't think he did. I think that was Celebrini's year. I don't think he ever won a Hobey. But the next year, he won up himself by getting one more point in one less game, scoring 15 goals and 49 points in 38 appearances. But nothing quite matches what he did last season with the Habs. 66-point rookie campaign is insane for any player, let alone an undersized rookie defenseman playing in the NHL at just 20 and 21 years of age. This is a special talent, and 8 years at $8.85 million with a very, very quickly rising cap. This is already, in my opinion, going to be a bargain from year one. By year 8, it's going to be way below market value. This contract takes him all the way through age 30, and the structure is also very much in terms of signing bonuses and overall just making that very buyout proof. But I don't think there's ever going to be much of a concern in terms of buyouts with Lane Hutson on this contract. And as it ends as well at the age of 30 years old, he'll still have quite a few UFA years where he's going to be a high-end player in the National Hockey League that are still going to be there for him to earn more money. So I can see why his camp liked the idea of this, but I think in general, this is very much a sign of him buying into the project that is the Montreal Canadiens, what they're building. And we'll be talking about that a little bit more here in the next segment coming up, where we'll be discussing just how this contract also compares to other defenders around the league and how this reflects a little bit what the Habs are building. But first, a quick message from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. Most people can't name all of their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. And that's why Monarch Money comes in. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings together your entire financial life in one clean, easy-to-use interface that you can use anywhere on your laptop or even on your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you've put off organizing your finances, it is made for you. It does all the heavy lifting. You can link all of your accounts in just minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel like you are in control of your money without ever having to touch a single spreadsheet. Don't let financial opportunities slip you by. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year if you use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com. All right, let's keep this episode rolling here in the second segment, talking about Lane Hutson and this really big but kind of bargain extension that he signed here with the Montreal Canadiens. And let's kick things off talking about the big picture of the Montreal Canadiens organization, the internal salary cap structure, really built off of genuinely the biggest gift that Marc Bergevin left this team. And that was, the last month or two of his tenure with the Montreal Canadiens. The big Nick Suzuki extension, 8 years at $7.85 million a season, matched by Cole Caulfield's contract coming a year after that. Lane Hutson, in terms of cap percentage, is actually falling underneath that number in terms of the proportion that he will be using of the salary cap in the first year of his contract. As a reminder, next season, the salary cap is projected to be around $104 million. So we're talking around an 8.5% of the cap in that year one of the deal. And I think that also speaks volumes about the respect that Nick Suzuki garners in the locker room of players not wanting to really leapfrog what he's earning. And of course, that is the structure for deals coming out of their entry-level contracts. These three contracts, including Suzuki and Caulfield, are all deals that came out of the ELC. You can add on Slafkovsky's contract there as well. He slipped well underneath in terms of cap percentage and also underneath in terms of pure dollars, if I'm not mistaken. And Lane Hutson is just following that up. Noah Dobson was an exception to that because he already signed a contract after his ELC, earning $4 million or $4.5 million a year for a couple years in a bridge contract that he signed with the Islanders. So this contract that he signed with the Habs carries him well into his 30s rather than kind of ending there at the 30-year age mark where you can still kind of cash in on another 4 or 5 years of big-time dollars. Noah Dobson, unless he can carry through elite level defensive metric and production through that time, is likely not going to see the same type of money at that point as he is in this contract. So different situations a little bit here. So that internal cap structure that the Montreal Canadiens have built speaks volumes about the contract negotiation and the managerial structure of Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton coming in and using very, very boldly and very, very incessantly that Nick Suzuki contract as kind of the definition of what every other deal in the organization is based off of. And also, again, of the respect that Nick Suzuki has in that locker room. He's very much a lead by example kind of player, and more in the last year or two has become much more vocal in the locker room and has also been growing as a leader. And I think that we should see him cracking the Team Canada lineup at the Olympics, which Lane Hutson, unfortunately, is not for Team USA. He was not invited to the showcase or the training camp for the Olympic roster there a couple months ago. But I have a couple ideas that he might be making an Olympic roster at some point in the future. It probably will not take longer than the next Olympics after these coming up in Milan in Italy. But going back to Lane Hutson among NHL contracts, this is fascinating to me as an overall kind of deal. Like the Habs now have two of the higher paid defensemen in the National Hockey League under their books starting next season. Noah Dobson this year is tied for the 6th highest cap hit among all blue liners in the National Hockey League. Only Erik Karlsson, Rasmus Dahlin, Drew Doughty, and Evan Bouchard and Zach Werenski actually earn more than him, and he's on par in terms of dollars with Adam Fox, Seth Jones, and Charlie McAvoy at $9.5 million. Lane Hutson at 8.85 is going to come in just under that at 16th in the National Hockey League. That's coming in just a tad bit underneath players like Cale Makar, Luke Hughes, Dougie Hamilton, Jacob Chychrun, and guys like Darnell Nurse and Roman Yossi as well, and a little bit more than guys like Moritz Seider and Brock Faber, for instance. But it becomes a little bit more interesting if we're talking about specifically the percentage of the cap. And I think that this is a really interesting kind of metric to look at in terms of evaluating contracts, because this is what agents and teams use. The public always kind of obsesses over the raw AAV, the raw number that looks shiny on the outside, but it really is the cap percentage that is king in negotiation. So, for instance, Noah Dobson's cap percentage is 9.95, so just a teeny bit under that 10% mark. There are only 17 defensemen in the National Hockey League who signed contracts where in the first year of that deal that they were over 10%, the highest among those being Erik Karlsson with 14.11. He's the only guy over 14, and only Drew Doughty also is able to leapfrog the 12.5% of Rasmus Dahlin at number 3. And Lane Hutson actually comes in quite low on this list relative to the other players around him. He's actually sneaking underneath Quinn Hughes' current contract, which is universally regarded as an absolute steal, as well as being kind of like underneath guys like Luke Hughes and Jared Spurgeon and Morgan Riley, and at 8.5%. It's underneath a guy like Vince Dunn as well in Seattle. I think that if you're just looking at it in terms of cap percentages, the likelihood of him matching that value in year one is already very, very high. And if you kind of link that percentage year to year and see how that evolves, because the cap is rising so rapidly, almost $10 million every single season, that number is just going to plummet. By the last couple of years of that deal, it might be around 6% of the cap in terms of what he's actually taking up in space. And that will permit the Habs to have a bunch of flexibility in what they do with the other money. And as I'm mentioning, this is a real reflection of buy-in. The Habs want to build a contender. That is true from the management. That is true from the fan base. And very, very clearly, and this is not always the case in the National Hockey League, it's true for the players as well. Like, these are teammates. That is a very tight group, very clearly. And I think that really resonates in the contracts that are being signed in the last couple seasons here. Of course, Kent Hughes, as a former mega agent, has a lot of negotiating skill and power to kind of get those numbers down a little bit and just be patient and bide his time and strike at the right moment. But I think that it speaks for so much more than just those raw facts. Like, these players want to be in Montreal. Montreal is an appealing place to play hockey, and you saw that with Noah Dobson targeting the Habs. He wanted Montreal specifically in this offseason. Of course, he wanted a team that could pay him the money that he was demanding, and he kind of wanted to stay around the Eastern Conference as well. And Montreal's basically the closest team to home for him as well in Nova Scotia. Still, I think, or PEI, sorry. I still think that this is just wonderful news if you're a Montreal Canadiens fan, not just because the Habs are going to have more cap and more budget to play around with to build a contender. It's nice to have a team that wants to grow together, where the group of players themselves don't just get along. They're not just buddies. They are making financial sacrifices to be as good as possible together. They want to win as a collective. They want to win with this group. And that speaks volumes about the direction that this organization has gone into. I mean, in the 2010s, even with players like Carey Price and PK Subban and a lot of stars coming through Montreal, consistency was often hard to come by for this organization. And that was especially true off the ice. There was a lot of friction, whether it be in the Michel Therrien years, a lot of just stories coming out of, whether it be locker room arguments between coaches and players, whether it be off-ice things. This is not the case with this current team. It is a really fun thing to see, and I think a lot of NHL organizations are going to try to model their retools or quick rebuilds after how the Montreal Canadiens have kind of approached theirs, of trying to basically have a foundational piece. Doesn't have to be your best player at the end of the day, but maybe your most important player on a shift-to-shift basis, your most reliable player, your captain, like Nick Suzuki is in Montreal, and try to basically build your entire salary structure around them. We've seen it done before. It's not revolutionary for the Habs to do, but I think that the effectiveness with which they have actually been able to execute this has been quite impressive. And I think the Habs are a team that's built for success moving forward. But we'll talk a little bit more about Lane Hutson, the player, what he's going to bring to the Habs in this contract, and what to expect of him this season, while also taking a little bit of a look back in time, because I've been watching this player for so long. I want to talk a little bit as well about what my first impressions were when I first started watching him. And so we'll wrap up the show with a little bit of everything, a little bit of a mishmash. But first, a quick message from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospect. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer that you do not want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it gives me so many options and ways to play. I've built parlays, tried player props, and even followed the game live as it unfolds in front of me on the couch. It makes things so exciting to just place a bet between periods. And I know I personally love same game parlays where I can combine multiple takes, multiple predictions into one in order to maximize my potential return. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. All righty, let's wrap up the show here in the final segment, breaking down the Lane Hutson contract, how this fits in across the league, and overall what this means for the Montreal Canadiens, because this is a massive win for the organization, as we were talking about there in the previous segment. I think that it is a win on so many fronts, of course, in terms of just the pure dollars, but also what it means, and about also the fact that Lane Hutson's contract isn't just going to be a looming storyline over this team that the players are pestered about and the management is pestered about at every single media availability. It takes some weight off the shoulders. They can just focus on what's going on the ice. And I think it's just great news for the Habs to have also a team now where, unlike last season in a way, there isn't all the pressure on Lane Hutson to be the offensive guy from the blue line. I do think long-term this is going to be the best offensive blue liner on the team, but with Noah Dobson arriving, with Mike Matheson seemingly rolling it back a year or two alongside Noah Dobson in terms of the offensive dynamism, the constant activations, the dare in creating in the offensive zone, Lane Hutson doesn't have all of the weight of the world like he did last year, where seemingly if he didn't create something from the blue line, nobody would. That just is not the case here anymore. And he's also now also has a cap hit that reflects that role in a sense of not just being the only offensive piece, like the Erik Karlsson contract, for instance, signify when he extended there in San Jose. But to talk a little bit about Lane Hutson's progression, I want to take us back to the 2022 draft cycle. I watched a lot of players in that year. It was my first year where I was getting like a whole whack of live viewing. So it's also a draft class in terms of the players there that feels special to me. It was the first group that I really, really delved into super deeply. And Lane Hutson was perhaps the first player that I completely fell in love with as kind of like one of my guys that I was just banging the table for. And not everyone was kind of willing to listen, but every single time I watched, I just could not understand why he wasn't ranked higher by most outlets. He's a really special player. So I want to read to you an excerpt from a game. This was the BioSteel game in that 2021-22 season, playing with the NTDP. And this is what I had to write in my game report. Lane Hutson really stood out. He was his typical offensive zone self. Great playmaking, somehow weaseling his way out of trap positions with the puck, dynamic in transition. He had a great secondary assist where he moved around with the puck at the offensive blue line for quite a while and then quickly stepped forward to hit Logan Cooley right on the tape, who was alone against the goaltender. That shot didn't go in, but Cole Spicer knocked home the rebound. Hutson also had a shift where he demonstrated the best defensive plays I've seen from him so far. He blocked a high-danger scoring chance, and he then cut off a cross-seam pass on a surefire goal. And then he stopped Cole Knubel off the rush right after that. If he can do all of this and more consistently, he's easily a top 15 player for me. He ended up at number 11 on my board, so quite clearly he did gain consistency in the back half of that season. He also sprung Logan Cooley on a breakaway with a great breakout pass in the third period. He may be small, but he's really, really special. And I think that Lane Hutson's always been this player. He's always built on it. He's added strength. He's become much smoother in his pivots. He's become much more active defensively, much better at angling players towards the boards. But he's always been this offensive jitterbug. He can always create something out of nothing. He's always been this version of himself, just so daring, just ceaseless offense pouring out of him, and doing so with such creativity and freedom that is truly special among prospects, whether you're talking about forwards or defensemen alike. And I've scouted quite a few draft classes at this point. I started doing this in 2020, and now I'm on my, seventh season doing this for the 2026 NHL draft, and even including guys eligible for this season. Guys like Lane Hutson are special. If you want another Lane Hutson type player who's coming through, check out Xavier Villeneuve of the Blainville-Boisbriand Armada, developing just north of the Montreal shore, just off the island, and quite clearly also modeling his game after Lane Hutson, the way he moves, the shiftiness, but he's an even better skater than Lane Hutson was at this age, and he's a bit bigger, he's a bit more defensively involved. Very, very fun player, definitely one to keep your eyes on, and in my opinion, a surefire bet for a top 10, maybe not selection, who knows, undersized defenseman, you never know, but he's, I think, around 5'11" or 6 feet tall. But he should be a top 10 pick. Even in a stacked draft like this one, he's got top 5 skill, top 3 skill, in my opinion. Really special player there with Villeneuve. But back to Lane Hutson. Let's talk about what this deal is going to, or what this player is going to look like moving forward. We've talked enough here about the contract and the details and the cap percentages and whatnot. What to expect of Lane Hutson moving forward? I think offense is the obvious thing here, but he's the ultimate on-puck facilitator. He makes the lives of his teammates so much easier. He's so easy to trust in possession in all 3 zones, whether it be in the breakout, whether it be streaking through the neutral zone, or holding on to the puck at the offensive blue line as the last man back, where a single cough-up would lead to a breakaway against, and every single mistake is very much amplified. Every single player in the Montreal Canadiens trusts him with their lives. They trust possession in his hands more than probably any other player in the lineup in terms of just how slippery he is. He can come out of any situation with possession. He can create, he can find passes through the thinnest of openings and do so with a no look, with a shoulder shimmy, with just every aspect of his body being incredibly difficult to decipher. Hudson's never been the smoothest player in terms of how he moves. There's a jitteriness to it. Almost looks like yeah, I don't know, like almost like there's hesitation in there in ways, but that movement, it seems so unnatural to try to read from a defensive perspective that it's just consistently opened up so many offensive opportunities for him. Going back to his draft year, this was kind of one of the marks against him for many people of, oh, he moves with kind of like this rigidity almost. Obviously, he's slippery and he gets out of spaces, but it almost looks like he shouldn't because he just does this one same shoulder fake every single time, but he's just always able to make the opponent miss because he reads and reacts, and he's able to process things quicker than 98% of players on the ice, even at this high level of hockey in the National Hockey League. It makes him very unique. The way he moves, the way he's able to make players miss, the way he's able to blend a quick move into a cross-ice feed that is incredibly well-weighted, perfectly on the tape, and just makes everybody miss. Like, he makes goals easy to score for his teammates. They often have wide open or half open cages to aim for, and it was so often, even last season, where it was like, oh my God, Lane Hutson should have had 2 more assists than he did in this game because his teammates missed these grade A opportunities that he's just constantly serving up to them. And that's Lane Hutson's game. He's just constantly creating. But I also want to talk about the defensive side here to wrap up the show because I think it's the most underrated part of his game. He's just consistently gotten better and better and better at it. The stick work, the precision with which he's able to block passing lanes, break up plays. He's always getting underneath sticks, underneath opponents. He's gotten a lot better at working leverage against bigger, stronger opposition to still come out of puck battles with possession. He had, I think, like a top 5 or top 10 takeaways among all defensemen in the NHL last season. Like, yeah, he's not going to lay hits. He's not going to blow up opponents. It's not his game. You've got other players that can do that, like Arbor Jacki and Caden Gooley, for instance. What Lane Hutson does, it's do the very, very best that he can with his frame and adapt his entire style of play on both sides of the puck to his build. He is just really, really good at understanding his own limitations and his own advantages and doubling down on those advantages and mitigating the deficiencies and finding ways to still be really supportive within those constraints. And he's never viewed his size as a limitation, just like Cole Caulfield hasn't. And I remember a Cole Caulfield quote from his draft year of saying, if I was bigger, I wouldn't have scored this many goals as he did in his record-breaking season that Cole Eisman broke a couple years later. I'm not sure actually if he broke the season. I think he broke overall like goals in the program through 2 years. Anyways, that's an aside. But his ability, Lane Hutson's ability to just view his build as a strength and find advantages to create with that slipperiness and agility, that's a massive strength. And again, on the defensive side, he's become a lot better facing the rush. Yeah, there are still plays where he doesn't come out looking fantastic, but name me a single defenseman in the NHL where that doesn't happen ever. There might be 4 or 5 of them. They are special talents on the defensive side of the puck. And with Lane Hutson's just purely dynamic offensive toolkit, he doesn't have to be at that level of a defender. He does, of course, have to defend at an NHL level, but I think he does that. And even if he's slightly subpar at this stage, which I don't think he is relative to the deployment and the quality of competition that he faces, I think he's actually like close to like a 65th or 70th percentile in terms of defensive impact, in terms of combination of metrics that I've seen and eye tests that I've had in my viewings. This is a very good player, and the swing here that the Habs are taking, betting big, 8-year contract, not much risk. And I think that this is going to be universally regarded as pretty much a steal of a contract by most people, especially relative to other contracts that have just been signed in the last month or two here, like Luke Hughes signing at $9 million a season. I think Lane Hutson's a better player than Luke Hughes, and I don't think that should be a hot take. Same thing with Jackson Lacombe, one of the most underrated players in the entire NHL, especially in the Eastern Conference. Fans are really just learning how fantastic of a player he is. And trust me, I have so much respect for the way that Jackson Lacombe is able to blend mobility, offensive impact, fluidity, and also high-end defensive impact. Like, this guy is fantastic defensively, significantly better than Lane Hutson in his own zone. But in terms of overall impact, Lane Hutson is a more special talent, and I think that he's going to have a whole lot more points under his belt at the end of his career than any of those other defensemen that he's kind of competing with in terms of cap hits that have been signed very recently here that are also just coming off of their entry-level deals. But I'd love to pass the question on to you. What are your takeaways of this Lane Hutson contract? Are you elated? Are you annoyed? If you're a Habs fan, how do you feel? If you're a non-Habs fan, what's your impression? I'd love to hear both sides of this coin. I grew up in Montreal. I've got some Habs bias. That's just how it is growing up as a Montrealer. But as somebody that has been a fan of Lane Hutson way longer than he's been a Hab, I like this for both sides. I think that Lane Hutson buying into a team slightly below market value for long term also just fits his character. This is always a player that's put the team in front of himself, and this contract is not a reflection of personal gain or trying to maximize every single penny he can make in his career. He knows he's going to be comfortable for the rest of his life with this contract, and that's clearly enough. And the Habs are, I think, going to reap some benefits from the extra cap that they're going to have available that Lane Hutson also left on the table by signing this right now and not extending the contract standoff any longer than 3 games into the year going into his contract season. So that wraps up the show here for us today. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, if you're watching on YouTube, please, again, leave a comment, like, subscribe. It helps me with the algorithm. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please do make sure to make us your first listen of the day. And for your second listen, you can head on over to Locked On Fantasy Hockey, where Flip and Steel break down everything that you need to know to build yourself a competitive and sustainable fantasy roster. Lane Hutson, especially if you're in a league that has contracts that match NHL teams, he's going to be a gem for a really, really long time. But that is it. That is all. I'm your host, Sebastian High. Thank you so much for listening as always. And I'll catch you tuning in again very, very soon.